guys, welcome back to Nadir Audio. Today we're going to be taking a look at my vintage 1968 Fisher 150 stereo receiver and matching speakers. Okay, so before we get too far into this, I did want to mention that I don't necessarily consider the Fisher 150 receiver and these matching Model 5 speakers to be audiophile gear, in the sense that an audiophile would be happy with this as their main listening system. I do think it's definitely hi-fi, and I think an audiophile could really enjoy this system in certain contexts, which we'll talk a little bit more about later in the video. But you know, when you think of Fisher from the 60s, at least from the early 60s, you probably think of receivers like the 400 or the 500C. You know, those earlier 60s tube-based receivers, I would definitely consider those to be audiophile gear. And I've actually always wanted to pick up a 500C, and maybe will someday, just to check that out. But this is actually part of a series that Fisher came out with, I think, in 1966, where they were moving towards transistorizing their whole lineup. So this is 100% solid state. And there actually was a version of the 500 in the late 60s that was all transistors. I think it was called the 500T. And I don't have any experience with that particular receiver. I know in general they're not as highly desirable as the earlier ones, but it very well may be a very nice system. Now a 500T I think is maybe 28 watts. And this, I believe, is about half that. This is about a 15-watt receiver. So why are we featuring this today? Well, I do think it sounds really good in certain contexts, which we'll talk about. But moreover, this particular one is very special to me because it's actually the first stereo that I ever listened to. My parents actually bought this new in 1968, shortly after they got married. And when they bought it, they paid the princely sum of $200, which doesn't sound like a lot. But you know, if you bring up an inflation calculator and plug that in for today's money, let's see, this one brings up $1,486.66. So we'll say about $1,500 roughly. Now you can get a pretty nice receiver and speakers for that. Not high end, but you know, something definitely higher than this was at the time. I think just at that time, you know, stereos and certainly televisions were just generally more expensive, and you'd have to spend a bigger part of your income to pick one up. So for this guy, you know, I'm nostalgic for it because I spent many hours in front of this when I was a little kid in the 70s, and especially in 1979. Actually, my dad went to Japan and came back with some electronics that I guess were a lot cheaper there, and a couple of things that he brought back. One was a set of Pioneer headphones, and the other was a Technics cassette deck. And definitely when he brought those back, then I listened to this a lot more, because you know, this was in our living room. And, you know, while I used it a lot back then, and, you know, I would listen to my parents' records on a Gerard turntable, and later, you know, listen to cassettes, and definitely listened a lot to the radio. You know, there wasn't a lot of times in our house where the living room was, you know, empty, where you weren't being distracted by TV or other people. So, you know, I'd try to make time maybe after school. My sisters were with their friends or something like that, but it was when we got those headphones, that's definitely when I started listening to this thing a ton. Now, you know, even at the time though, I was aware that this system didn't sound as good as some of my friends' parents' systems, you know, some of the newer 70s stuff. And so, you know, for a long time I did want to get my own, and eventually I did buy my own receiver in 8th grade. I had saved up money from kind of a local lawn mowing business that I had, and so that would have been in 1982, 1983, somewhere in there, to replace this. And yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that one in an upcoming video. But for this one, it sounded nice, but it just was kind of more of a radio sound to me at the time, and I was looking for something more like a stereo. Now, since then, I've sort of discovered that this thing is a lot better than I had thought, and you just kind of have to use it in the right context. So first of all, we have a built-in FM tuner. We've got the amplifier, we've got a balance, we've got some tone controls. The volume switch is also the on-off switch, and then we have a input selector. So there's the FM, there's the auxiliary, which I'm currently have plugged into a DAC here in my office, and I can use it to listen to stuff on my laptop. And then there's obviously a phono preamp in here, which I have tried it out in the past. I'm not using it currently, but I think the trick for this particular system is actually to use it as a near-field system. So you'll see that I have these speakers. Now let's talk a little bit about the speakers. So these are just two-way systems. So there's a woofer and a tweeter in here. The grills don't come off easily. You actually have to open the back, and then you can unscrew them from inside to take them out. But it's just a two-way speaker. And actually these things still have the, we can take a look real quick. I don't know if you can see this in the video, but it still actually has the little paper on the back of it that says the Fisher Model 5 speaker system, and just some instructions for how to hook it up. Now, I've done a little research. I don't know for sure because there's not a lot of information on the internet for this stuff, but I don't think the Model 5 was offered as a separate speaker. I think it just was designed specifically for these kind of smaller mini systems. But again, if you have more information on that, if you know more, definitely put that information in the comments, because I definitely like to know. But what happens is, so when you're listening to this thing and it's set up this way, you actually do get a bit of a sound stage, which is very surprising. The sound definitely comes from behind the speakers, and you get a sound stage basically in this area. It would sound like it was right behind the wall here. Now it's a very small sound stage, so it sounds like there's like maybe a big snow globe back here, and you've got like a little miniature symphony orchestra, or a jazz quartet, or whatever you're listening to. But the sound stage is, for vintage gear, it's pretty well defined. You can pick out kind of where the instruments are. They sound fairly realistic. If there's vocals, they'll come from right in the middle here. And it's a really interesting effect, and it actually can be very pleasant to listen to. So the general sound signature of this thing is, I guess you would consider it kind of an A curve. So it has a very nice warm sound. It's got a nice slightly boosted mid-range, I would say. It actually does have a little bit of bass. There's just no power behind it. You can hear the bass, but you're not going to feel the bass, which is about what you would expect. And then the highs are slightly rolled off, but you can get enough detail on this thing that you can enjoy listening to music. So it's a very pleasant sounding system. Now when if I listen to something on here and then immediately go into my music room and listen to it on the Sprouts through the LS50s, it's a completely different experience. All of a sudden the sound stage is life size and fairly large, and the resolving power goes way up. You get a lot more detail, especially in the high end. So I think even if you kind of like that A curve, this is going to be not quite be resolving enough, I think, that you would be happy with it as your only system. But if you're using it like I am here in my office, just as a way to listen to music, a lot of times I'll just have a laptop in front of it here on my desk. And, it's great for watching YouTube, and actually, even listening to music. Right before I filmed this video, I was listening to Miles Davis, Miles in the Sky, and I was really pretty impressed that this little thing, can create that sound. I mean, Tony Williams' drums just sounded pretty three-dimensional and real and lifelike, and you could hear where all the instruments were, and it was actually pretty cool. Now again, if I went in the other room and listened to it, it'd be a whole other thing. So I think what you're looking at with this is it's probably like a nice step up from a good quality table radio. and it's a step up because you do get a real soundstage with stereo. It's just that the main caveat with this is that it's not the fact that it doesn't quite have the detail, because not everybody wants tons of detail, and it is very enjoyable listening experience. The reason that I don't necessarily consider it audiophile is because it doesn't have a full soundstage. So when you start pulling the speakers farther apart, that they kind of disconnect. You lose the center, and then you're just getting some sound from behind the speaker way over on the left and some on the right. So this system just really can't fill a room, even a fairly small room, with sound. You really are stuck with a near field with this. But if you do that, I think you'd be very surprised at how good it does sound. And the only thing, everything on here works except for the stereo beacon lamp. So actually there's you can't just change the bulb in that. There's this whole lamp assembly, and I actually did do some research a few years ago when I got this from my parents, and I actually have a replacement lamp holder that could go into this. But it's kind of amazing that this thing is just it's never been fixed. At least my parents don't remember ever having to fix it. And that was for all the other stuff, like the TV that we had back then. All through the 70s, we had a late 60s tube-based TV, and that thing broke all the time. And every time you fixed it, the repair shop would put their sticker on the back, so you know to go back to them. There's no stickers on this. I don't ever remember as a kid it being broken or them having to fix it. So it's just kind of cool and interesting that this thing has been, inside of this thing, never taken out, inside of its chassis since it was new. So it's 50 years old and it still works and sounds great. And so I kind of figured, let's wait until something functional actually stops working. If the tuner stops working, surprisingly all the other lights in here still work, which is kind of amazing. But if there's start to have sound problems, or we lose left or right channel, or something happens where it really needs to be serviced, then we'll take it apart, and maybe I'll make a future video where I take it apart and we take a look at it, and if it's something I can fix, we'll fix it. If not, then we'll take it somewhere and have a experienced technician fix it up. But for now, this thing, who knows? This thing may outlive me. It may never need to be fixed in my lifetime. We'll see. But anyway, it's a cool little system. I have real nostalgic feelings for this thing, so I thought I would share it with you guys in today's video. So yeah, that's it. I'll be coming back soon with more videos, sharing some of my music collection, vinyl and CD collections, other equipment, some new equipment as well. And then I'll also be showing you some of the stereos that I upgraded to over the years from this. This was sort of the starting point for me. But yeah, that's it for now, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.